The Oklahoma Territory in 1891 stretched endlessly under a brutal sun, its red earth cracked and stubborn, yielding crops only to those brave or foolish enough to fight for every grain of wheat. Ezra Coleman was both a man of 35 who had carved a modest farm from the unforgiving land through sheer determination and backbreaking labor, standing 6 feet tall with shoulders broadened by years of wielding plows and axes. Ezra cut an impressive figure despite his worn clothes and calloused hands. His dark hair was always neat, his blue eyes steady and thoughtful, and his jaw carried the kind of strength that came from facing hardship without complaint. But what marked him most was his silence. Ezra Coleman was a man of few words, who let his actions speak for his character. His farm sat 5 miles outside the growing settlement of Red Rock, a collection of weathered buildings that served the homesteaders scattered throughout the territory. It was a good farm by Oklahoma standards, 80 acres of decent soil, with a reliable well and a sturdy house he'd built with his own hands. But it was a lonely farm, worked by a man who'd watched most of his neighbors marry and start families while he remained resolutely alone. "Ezra needs a wife," the townspeople would say, as if stating the obvious would somehow solve his problem. Man can't work a spread that size by himself forever. The truth was, Ezra had tried to find a wife. He'd courted Sarah Mitchell until she'd chosen the banker's son over a dirt farmer. He'd paid respectful attention to the widow Henderson until she'd decided to return east rather than face another harsh Oklahoma winter. Each rejection had driven him deeper into his shell of self-reliance and silence, which was why Martha Henley's proposition caught him completely off guard. Martha was the proprietor of Red Rock's only boarding house, a practical woman in her 50s who had opinions about everyone and wasn't shy about sharing them. She appeared at Ezra's farm one scorching July afternoon, her buggy loaded with what appeared to be someone's entire worldly possessions. "Ezra Coleman," she called out as he emerged from his barn. "I have a business proposition for you." Ezra wiped his hands on his work shirt and approached her buggy, noting the way she seemed nervous despite her usual forthright manner. "Mrs. Henley, what brings you out here in this heat?" "Necessity," Martha replied bluntly, "and the chance to solve 2 problems at once." She gestured toward the pile of belongings in her buggy, a few worn dresses, some books, a small trunk, and a quilt that had seen better days. "I've got a girl who needs a home and a husband. You've got a farm that needs a woman's touch and a man who needs a wife. Seems like a natural solution to me." Ezra studied the modest belongings with growing confusion. "What girl are you talking about, Mrs. Henley?" "Lucy Marsh. Been boarding with me for the past 6 months, working as my hired help in exchange for room and board." Martha's tone grew defensive. "She's a good girl, Ezra. Hard-working, honest, knows how to keep house and tend a garden. Problem is she's got no family, no prospects, and no dowry to speak of. And you think I should marry her?" Ezra asked carefully. "I think you should consider it," Martha corrected. "Lucy's 22 years old and hasn't had a single serious suitor in all the time she's been in Red Rock. She's not what most men consider pretty. Plain as a fence post, some say, and skinny as a rail. But she's got qualities that matter more than looks if you're smart enough to see them." Ezra was quiet for a long moment, processing this unexpected offer. He'd resigned himself to bachelorhood, but the idea of a partner, even one acquired through such practical arrangements, held undeniable appeal. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally. Martha's expression softened slightly. "Because Lucy deserves better than spending her life as an unpaid servant, and because you deserve better than growing old alone on this farm. Sometimes people need a little help finding what's good for them. Does she know you're here?" "She knows I was going to speak with you. And before you ask, yes, she's agreeable to the arrangement. Lucy's practical enough to understand that marriage to a decent man who can provide for her is better than the alternatives available to a girl in her position." Ezra looked around his farm, the house that echoed with emptiness, The fields he worked alone, the future that stretched ahead with nothing but more of the same solitude. The arrangement Martha proposed wasn't romantic, but it was honest. "I'd want to meet her first," Ezra said slowly. "Talk to her, make sure she understands what kind of life this would be." Martha's face broke into a smile of satisfaction. "I was hoping you'd say that. She's waiting back at the boarding house, nervous as a cat in a thunderstorm, but willing to hear what you have to say." The ride to Red Rock was accomplished mostly in silence, with Martha pointing out various improvements to Ezra's farm that a wife could make, while Ezra wondered what kind of woman would agree to marry a man she barely knew for the promise of security and respectability. The boarding house sat on Red Rock's main street, a two-story building that had seen better days but was kept scrupulously clean through Martha's determination. She led Ezra through the front parlor to the kitchen, where a young woman was peeling potatoes with mechanical precision. "Lucy, dear Mr. Coleman is here to meet you." The woman looked up, and Ezra felt his preconceptions shift immediately. Lucy Marsh wasn't beautiful in any conventional sense. Martha had been right about that. She was thin to the point of appearing fragile, with brown hair pulled back severely and grey eyes that seemed too large for her narrow face. Her dress was clean but patched in several places, and her hands showed the calluses of someone accustomed to hard work, but there was something in those grey eyes that caught Ezra's attention, an intelligence and quiet dignity that suggested depths Martha hadn't mentioned. "Mr. Coleman," Lucy said, setting down her knife and wiping her hands on her apron. Her voice was soft but clear, with just a hint of nervousness. "Mrs. Henley said you wanted to speak with me." "Yes, ma'am," Ezra replied, suddenly feeling awkward in the face of her direct gaze. "I understand you might be interested in... that is, Mrs. Henley thought we might consider marriage as a practical arrangement," Lucy finished gently, surprising him with her frankness. "Yes, sir. I would consider such an arrangement if the terms were acceptable to both parties." Ezra appreciated her straightforward approach. "What would you expect from such an arrangement?" Lucy was quiet for a moment, as if carefully considering her words. "Respect, Mr. Coleman. I would expect to be treated as a partner in managing your farm, not as hired help who happens to share your bed. I would expect fidelity and honesty. In return, I can offer you the same, plus whatever skills I have in keeping house, tending gardens, and managing the domestic side of farming life." "You've given this considerable thought," Ezra observed. "I've had few other options to consider," Lucy replied with a slight smile that transformed her plain features. "A woman in my position learns to think practically about her future." Ezra found himself impressed by her honesty and lack of false sentiment. "Mrs. Henley mentioned you have no family." "None living," Lucy confirmed. "My parents died of fever when I was 16. I've been making my own way since then, working where I could find employment. It's been challenging." "And you're willing to marry a man you don't know to change your circumstances?" Lucy met his eyes directly. "Mr. Coleman, I'm willing to marry a man who treats me with respect and offers me the chance to build something meaningful together. From what I've heard about you, that describes your character. The fact that we don't know each other well, that can change if we're both willing to try." Ezra felt something ease in his chest at her practical wisdom. "You realize my farm is isolated? That you'd be miles from town, from other women to talk with?" "I realize it. I also realize that loneliness isn't cured by proximity to other people, if those people don't value your company. I've been lonely in crowds. Mr. Coleman, I might find more companionship with one person who respects me than I've found among dozens who barely notice I exist." Her words resonated with Ezra's own experience more than she could know. He made his decision with characteristic directness. "Miss Marsh, if you're willing, I'd be honored to marry you. I can't promise romance or passionate declarations, but I can promise respect, fidelity, and the chance to build a good life together." Lucy's smile was radiant despite its gentleness. "Then I accept your proposal, Mr. Coleman. When would you like to hold the ceremony?" "How about Saturday?" Ezra found himself smiling in return. That gives us time to make proper arrangements. As they shook hands to seal their agreement, both Ezra and Lucy felt they'd made a practical decision that would benefit them both. Neither suspected that their wedding night would reveal depths of character and capacity for love that would transform their careful arrangement into something far more powerful and beautiful than either had dared to. Hope, the silent farmer, had found his bride, and the unwanted girl had found her chance at happiness. What they would discover together would amaze not just themselves, but everyone who had dismissed them as a marriage of mere convenience. Saturday dawned clear and surprisingly mild for July in Oklahoma Territory, as if the harsh land was offering a brief reprieve for the unlikely couple preparing to wed. The ceremony was set for 2 o'clock at the small Methodist church in Red Rock, and by Martha Henley's insistence, it would be a proper wedding, despite the practical nature of the arrangement. Ezra stood before his shaving mirror that morning, studying his reflection with unusual attention to detail. He'd bought a new shirt for the occasion, white cotton with pearl buttons that Martha had assured him would be appropriate. His best suit, purchased 3 years ago for his father's funeral, still fit well enough, and his dark hair was neatly combed with pomade that gave it an unaccustomed shine. "Getting married," he said aloud to his reflection, the words feeling strange in his mouth. In just a few hours, he would no longer be the solitary farmer who lived alone with his crops and his silence. He would be a husband, with all the responsibilities and possibilities that entailed. The thought both excited and terrified him. Meanwhile, at the boarding house, Lucy was experiencing her own mixture of anticipation and nervousness as Martha helped her prepare for the ceremony. The older woman had surprised Lucy that morning with a dress she'd never seen before, a simple but elegant creation in soft blue cotton with tiny white flowers embroidered around the neckline and sleeves. "Where did this come from?" Lucy asked in amazement as Martha helped her into the dress. "Been working on it for the past month," Martha replied, with obvious satisfaction. "Ever since I decided you and Ezra would be perfect for each other. Every girl deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day." Lucy studied herself in Martha's mirror, hardly recognizing the woman looking back at her. The blue dress brought out the color of her eyes and complemented her pale skin in a way her usual brown work dress never had. Martha had also insisted on styling her hair differently. Instead of the severe bun she usually wore, her brown hair was arranged in a softer style that framed her face and made her appear less angular and more feminine. "I look different," Lucy observed with wonder. "You look like yourself, just presented properly," Martha corrected. "Beauty isn't about having perfect features, dear. It's about carrying yourself with confidence and letting your inner light shine through." As Lucy examined her reflection, she felt something she'd rarely experienced, a sense of her own worth and attractiveness. For the first time in years, she felt like a woman preparing for her wedding rather than a burden being passed from one household to another. The ceremony itself was small but dignified. Reverend Morrison performed the service with the gravity befitting a sacred sacrament, while Martha served as Lucy's witness, and Tom Bradley, the general store owner, stood up for Ezra. A handful of townspeople had gathered to witness the union, their faces showing varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and surprise. Ezra felt his breath catch when Lucy walked down the short aisle toward him. In the blue dress, with her hair styled softly around her face, she looked nothing like the plain, tired young woman he'd met in Martha's kitchen just days before. She carried herself with quiet dignity and grace, her grey eyes steady and calm as she approached the altar. "She cleans up nice," he heard someone whisper from the pews, and he had to resist the urge to turn around and glare at whoever had made such a thoughtless comment. Lucy took her place beside him, and Ezra caught a hint of lavender water, a feminine touch that made him suddenly, powerfully aware that he was marrying not just a domestic partner, but a woman with her own mysteries and depths. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Morrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the small church, We are gathered here today to witness the union of Ezra Coleman and Lucy Marsh in holy matrimony. The ceremony proceeded with traditional dignity, but Ezra found himself paying more attention to the woman beside him than to the Reverend's words. Up close, he could see that Lucy's hands, though work-worn, were graceful and steady. Her profile showed a quiet strength he hadn't noticed before, and when she spoke her vows, her voice was clear and confident. I, Lucy, take thee, Ezra, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, for better or for worse, as long as we both shall live. When it came time for Ezra to recite his vows, he found himself looking directly into Lucy's eyes and meaning the words more than he'd expected. I, Ezra, take thee, Lucy, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, for better or for worse, as long as we both shall live. The kiss that sealed their marriage was brief and chaste, but Ezra felt a warmth in it that surprised him. Lucy's lips were soft, and for just a moment, he caught a glimpse of something deeper than practical arrangement in her grey eyes. After the ceremony, Martha had organized a small reception at the boarding house, complete with cake and coffee for the guests. Lucy moved through the gathering with gracious composure, thanking people for their attendance and deflecting the more intrusive questions about their sudden engagement with polite but firm responses. Mrs. Coleman, Reverend Morrison said, approaching Lucy as she served cake to the guests, I hope you'll find happiness here in Red Rock. It's a good community, and Ezra is a fine man. Thank you, Reverend, Lucy replied with a warm smile. I'm looking forward to making my home here and contributing to the community however I can. Ezra watched his new wife navigate the social obligations of their wedding reception and felt his respect for her growing. She might be poor in material terms, but she had a natural grace and dignity that made her seem perfectly at ease in any situation. As the afternoon wore on, guests began to take their leave, offering congratulations and wishes for happiness. Finally, only Martha remained to help clean up, and then it was time for Ezra and Lucy to travel to his farm, their farm now, to begin their married life. The ride through the Oklahoma countryside was accomplished mostly in comfortable silence, with Lucy studying the landscape that would be her new home and Ezra stealing occasional glances at the woman who was now his wife. She sat straight and alert, taking in everything with obvious interest. It's beautiful country, Lucy said finally, her voice carrying genuine appreciation. Harsh but beautiful in its own way. It's hard land, Ezra replied. Takes everything you've got to make it yield crops. And some years it breaks your heart anyway. But you love it, Lucy observed, noting the way his voice warmed when he spoke of the challenges. I suppose I do, Ezra admitted. Never thought of it that way, but yes, I love it. The independence, the feeling of building something with your own hands, even the hardships. They feel honest, Lucy nodded with understanding. I think I can learn to love it too. I've always preferred country life to town living. There's something about being close to the earth that feels real. As they approached Ezra's farmhouse, Lucy got her first clear view of what would be her new home. It was a modest structure but well built, with a wide front porch and windows that spoke of a man who valued both practical comfort and simple beauty. The barn and outbuildings were in good repair, and the fields, though showing the effects of the summer heat, were clearly well tended. It's lovely, Lucy said with genuine warmth. You've built something to be proud of here. Ezra felt a flush of pleasure at her approval. It's not fancy, but it's solid. Should serve us well for many years to come. As he helped her down from the wagon and they gathered her modest belongings, both Ezra and Lucy felt the significance of the moment settling around them. They were no longer just two lonely people, making a practical arrangement. They were a married couple beginning their life. Together, the sun was setting over the Oklahoma plains as they stood together on the porch of their farmhouse. And Lucy turned to her new husband with an expression that was both shy and determined. Ezra, she said softly, I want you to know that I intend to be a real wife to you, not just a housekeeper who happens to share your name. I know our beginning wasn't conventional, but I believe we can build something meaningful together if we're both willing to try." Ezra looked into her grey eyes and saw not the desperate gratitude he'd expected, but genuine hope and quiet strength. "Lucy, I think you might be right. I think we might surprise everyone, including ourselves." As they walked together into their new home, neither could have imagined what revelations their wedding night would bring, or how completely their careful, practical arrangement was about to transform into something far more beautiful and powerful than either had dared to hope. The silent farmer and the unwanted girl were about to discover that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the most ordinary arrangements. The farmhouse felt different with Lucy in it, warmer somehow, despite the practical nature of their arrangement. As evening settled over the Oklahoma plains, Ezra found himself acutely aware of his new wife's presence as she moved through the rooms, familiarizing herself with her new home. "You keep a tidy house," Lucy observed, running her fingers along the kitchen table he'd made himself 3 years earlier. "Everything has its place and purpose." "Habit," Ezra replied, suddenly self-conscious about his bachelor ways. "When you live alone, organization becomes necessary for survival." Lucy smiled at that, the expression transforming her plain features in a way that made Ezra's breath catch. "I understand completely. Order creates peace, especially when life itself can be chaotic." She moved to the window and looked out at the darkening landscape, her silhouette outlined by the last rays of sunlight. Ezra found himself studying her profile, noting details he'd missed during their brief courtship. The determined set of her chin, the graceful line of her neck, the way she held herself with quiet dignity despite her humble circumstances. "Ezra," Lucy said, turning from the window to face him, "I want to be honest with you about something." "What's that?" Lucy took a breath as if gathering courage. "I wasn't entirely truthful when I said I had no prospects in Red Rock. There was one man who showed interest in me." Ezra felt an unexpected stab of something that might have been jealousy. "What happened?" "His name was Walter Cross. He owns the feed store, and he's been widowed for 2 years now." Lucy's voice grew quiet. "He approached me about 3 months ago, suggesting an arrangement similar to what we've agreed to. But you refused him." "I did." Lucy met Ezra's eyes directly. "Would you like to know why?" Ezra nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to hear the answer, because when Walter looked at me, all he saw was a solution to his domestic problems. Someone to cook his meals, mind his store, and warm his bed without requiring emotional investment in return. Lucy's voice grew stronger. "But when you look at me, Ezra, I see something different in your eyes. Respect, interest in who I am, not just what I can do for you." Ezra felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. "Lucy, I want you to know that this marriage, it doesn't have to remain purely practical if we find we suit each other in other ways." "I was hoping you'd say that," Lucy replied softly, "because I have a confession to make." She walked to the small trunk that held her worldly possessions and opened it carefully. From beneath her few clothes, she withdrew a leather portfolio tied with ribbon. Her movements were reverent, as if she were handling something precious. "What is it?" Ezra asked, curious about the obvious care she was taking. "My secret," Lucy replied, untying the ribbon with gentle fingers. "The part of myself I've never shared with anyone in Red Rock because poor girls aren't supposed to have dreams beyond survival." She opened the portfolio, and Ezra's eyes widened in amazement. Inside were dozens of drawings and paintings, landscapes, portraits, still lifes, all executed with skill that took his breath away. The Oklahoma plains came alive under her hand, rendered in pencil and watercolor, with an artist's eye for beauty and detail. "Lucy," Ezra breathed, picking up a watercolor painting of a prairie sunrise that captured the landscape he knew so well, with startling accuracy. You made these?" "I've been drawing since I was a child," Lucy explained, her cheeks flushing with a mixture of pride and nervousness. My mother taught me before she died. It was our secret time together, just her and me with paper and pencils. After she passed, I kept drawing because it was the only way I could feel close to her. Ezra studied the artwork with growing amazement. Each piece showed not just technical skill, but genuine artistic vision. Why didn't you tell anyone in town? These are beautiful, Lucy. You have real talent, because talent doesn't put food on the table or pay for lodging, Lucy replied practically. And because, well, people already thought I was odd. Enough without adding artistic pretensions to their list of my faults. Ezra set down the painting and looked at his wife, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Lucy, this changes everything, does it? Lucy asked with obvious apprehension. Are you disappointed that I kept this from you? Disappointed? Ezra moved closer to her, his voice filled with wonder. Lucy, I'm amazed. You're not just the practical woman I thought I was marrying. You're an artist. You see beauty where others see only emptiness. You create something lasting and meaningful from simple materials. Lucy's eyes filled with tears at his response. You're not angry that I deceived you. You didn't deceive me, Ezra said gently. You protected something precious until you felt safe enough to share it. I understand that completely. He picked up another drawing, this one a portrait of an elderly man with kind eyes and work-worn hands. Who is this? My father, Lucy replied softly. I drew it from memory 2 years after he died. I wanted to make sure I never forgot the way he looked when he smiled. Ezra studied the portrait, seeing in it not just artistic skill but deep love and attention to detail. You've captured something in his eyes. A warmth, a sense of humor. He looks like a man who enjoyed life despite its hardships. He did, Lucy confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. He always said that if you couldn't find beauty in your daily life, you weren't looking hard enough. Smart man, Ezra said, carefully returning the portrait to the portfolio. And he raised a remarkable daughter. Lucy looked up at him with an expression that was both grateful and questioning. Ezra, what does this mean for us? For our marriage? Ezra took her hands in his, work-roughened hands that somehow felt perfectly right together. It means that I married someone far more extraordinary than I realized. It means that our practical arrangement has the potential to become something deeper and more meaningful than either of us expected. Do you really mean that? Lucy, look around you. Ezra gestured to his modest farmhouse. I've built a life focused entirely on survival and practical necessity. But you create beauty. You see possibilities where I see only challenges. You could transform not just this house, but this entire place, in ways I never imagined possible. Lucy's smile was radiant. Are you saying you'd be willing to let me paint? To pursue my art, even though it doesn't contribute directly to the farm's productivity? I'm saying I'd be honored to support your art in any way I can, Ezra replied firmly. A woman with your talent should have the freedom and resources to create. If our marriage can provide you with that security, then it's already more successful than I dared hope. Lucy stepped closer to him, her grey eyes bright with tears of joy. Ezra Coleman, I think I'm going to fall in love with you. Lucy Coleman, Ezra replied, using her married name for the first time. I think I'm halfway there already. Their second kiss was nothing like the chaste peck they'd shared at the altar. This was a kiss of discovery and promise, of two people realizing that their practical arrangement had already begun transforming into something far more precious. As they held each other in the lamplight of their farmhouse kitchen, surrounded by Lucy's artwork, both felt the shift from mere partnership to the beginning of genuine love. The silent farmer had found not just a wife, but a partner who could help him see beauty in the world he'd built. The unwanted girl had found not just security, but a man who valued her dreams as much as her domestic skills. Their wedding night had indeed amazed them both, though not in the way either had expected. They'd discovered that the most profound revelations often come not through grand gestures, but through the courage to share our hidden selves with someone worthy of the trust. The transformation of their marriage was just beginning. and neither could imagine how completely it would change not just their own lives, but the entire community's understanding of what love could look like when it grew from respect, acceptance, and the recognition of each other's true worth. 3 months into their marriage, the Coleman farm had begun to show signs of Lucy's influence in ways that amazed not just Ezra, but anyone who visited their property. What had once been a purely functional homestead was transforming into something that balanced practical necessity with unexpected beauty. Lucy had started small, planting wildflowers along the fence line and arranging the vegetable garden in patterns that were both productive and pleasing to the eye. But her most dramatic impact was visible in the house itself, where her artwork now graced the walls, and her woman's touch had added warmth and color to rooms that had been merely clean and organized. "Lucy, you've made this place into a home," Ezra said one evening as they sat on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the Oklahoma sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "I never realized how much difference a woman's touch could make." "It's not just a woman's touch," Lucy corrected gently, leaning against his shoulder with the comfortable intimacy that had developed between them. "It's the touch of someone who cares about beauty as much as utility. You could have learned to do these things yourself if you'd seen the value in them." Ezra considered this thoughtfully. "I suppose I never saw the point in decoration when there was so much practical work to be done. But now I understand that beauty isn't decoration," Ezra replied, tightening his arm around his wife. "It's hope, maybe. A statement that life is worth making lovely, not just livable." Lucy smiled at his insight. "My father used to say something similar. He believed that creating beauty was a way of showing gratitude for being alive." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses, unusual for their isolated farm, especially so late in the day. Ezra rose from his chair, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle he kept near the door. "Expecting anyone?" Lucy asked, though she could see from his expression that he wasn't. "No, but let's see who it is before we worry." The riders who emerged from the gathering dusk were Martha Henley and, surprisingly, Walter Cross, the feed store owner who had once propositioned Lucy. Both looked dusty from hard travel and wore expressions of obvious concern. "Martha, Walter," Ezra greeted them as they dismounted. "What brings you out here so late?" "Bad news, I'm afraid," Martha replied grimly. "There's been talk in town about Lucy, ugly talk." Lucy felt her stomach tighten with familiar dread. "What kind of talk?" Walter spoke up, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Some folks are saying that your marriage is unnatural, that a woman like you couldn't possibly satisfy a man like Ezra without resorting to improper means." "Improper means?" Ezra's voice was dangerously quiet. "Witchcraft," Martha said bluntly. "There are people claiming that Lucy has bewitched you with unnatural arts. They're pointing to the changes in your farm, the way you've been acting happier and more social, as evidence of supernatural influence." Lucy felt the blood drain from her face. Accusations of witchcraft, even in 1891, could destroy a woman's life and endanger her safety. "Who's spreading these stories?" "Mrs. Caldwell and her circle," Walter replied. "They can't understand how a plain woman like, forgive me, Lucy, how a woman they considered unmarriageable could win the devotion of a successful farmer like Ezra. So they've decided I must have used magic," Lucy said bitterly. "Because the alternative, that Ezra might actually love me for who I am, is apparently impossible to believe." Ezra moved to stand behind Lucy's chair, his hands resting protectively on her shoulders. "Let them talk. Anyone with eyes can see that our marriage is based on genuine affection and compatibility." "It's not that simple, Ezra," Martha warned. "Mrs. Caldwell has been organizing the other women against Lucy. They're planning to approach the territorial authorities about conducting an investigation. In the current climate, with all the anxiety about territorial statehood, accusations like this could have serious consequences." Lucy leaned back against Ezra's solid presence, drawing strength from his unwavering support. What do they want? For me to leave, for our marriage to fail so they can feel vindicated in their assumptions. They want to feel superior to someone, Walter said with surprising insight. Lucy, when you were poor and unwanted, you weren't a threat to their sense of their own worth. But now that you're clearly thriving and happy, they need to find a way to diminish your success. Over my dead body, Ezra said flatly. Lucy, you've done nothing wrong, and our marriage is nobody's business but ours. I appreciate your loyalty, Ezra, but we need to be practical about this, Lucy replied. If enough people believe these accusations, they could make life very difficult for both of us. Martha leaned forward in her chair. That's why we're here. We think there might be a way to stop this nonsense before it goes any further. What kind of way? Ezra asked suspiciously. A demonstration, Walter explained. The church social is next Saturday. If Lucy were to attend if people could see clear evidence that her influence on you is based on natural wifely virtues rather than supernatural powers, it might shut down the gossip. What kind of evidence? Lucy asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Your artwork, Martha said simply. Lucy, if people could see your paintings, understand that your ability to beautify your surroundings comes from genuine artistic talent rather than mystical powers, it would explain everything they find suspicious about your marriage. Lucy felt her heart skip a beat. You want me to display my paintings publicly? At the church social? Why not? Walter asked. They're beautiful, Lucy. I saw some of them when Martha showed me last week. If the women of Red Rock could see that your improvements to Ezra's farm come from the eye of an artist, not the spells of a witch, their accusations would collapse immediately. Lucy looked up at Ezra, seeking his opinion. What do you think? I think you're the most talented artist in the territory, and it's time everyone knew it, Ezra replied without hesitation. But the decision is yours, Lucy. I won't ask you to expose something precious to you just to silence gossips. Lucy stood and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the landscape she'd grown to love over the past 3 months. The farm showed everywhere the evidence of her influence, not through supernatural means, but through the application of artistic vision to practical living. You know what? She said finally, turning back to face the group. I'm tired of hiding my light under a bushel. If these women want to see how I've transformed our home and our life together, I'll show them exactly how it's done. You'll do it? Martha asked with obvious relief. I'll do it, Lucy confirmed, her voice growing stronger with each word. But not just to defend myself against ridiculous accusations. I'll do it to show every woman in Red Rock that we don't have to accept being dismissed as plain or worthless just because we don't fit their narrow definitions of feminine value. Ezra felt his chest swell with pride at his wife's courage. Lucy Coleman, you continue to amaze me, and I'll stand beside her every step of the way, Ezra added, addressing Martha and Walter. Anyone who wants to question my wife's character will have to answer to me first. Walter nodded approvingly. That's the spirit, Ezra. A united front is exactly what you need. As the visitors prepared to leave, Martha pulled Lucy aside for a private word. Lucy, dear, I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you've become. When I brought you to meet Ezra, I thought I was arranging a practical marriage for 2 lonely people. I had no idea I was helping create one of the strongest love matches I've ever seen. Lucy hugged the older woman warmly. Thank you, Martha, for seeing possibilities when everyone else saw only problems, for giving me the chance to find happiness. After Martha and Walter had ridden away, Lucy and Ezra remained on their porch, holding each other as the Oklahoma night settled around them. Are you nervous about Saturday? Ezra asked gently. Terrified, Lucy admitted honestly, but also excited. For the first time in my life, I'm going to stand up and demand to be seen for who I really am, not what people assume I am. And who are you, really, Lucy Coleman? Lucy smiled, the expression radiant in the moonlight. I'm an artist who happens to be an excellent farmer's wife. I'm a woman who creates beauty wherever she goes. And I'm deeply, completely in love with my husband. "Well, Mrs. Coleman," Ezra said, kissing her softly, "your husband is deeply, completely in love with you too. And come Saturday, the whole territory is going to understand why." As they went inside to prepare for bed, both Lucy and Ezra felt the excitement and nervousness that comes before a major life change. The church social would be more than just a social gathering. It would be Lucy's public declaration that she refused to be diminished by others. Limitations and prejudices. The silent farmer had found his voice in defending his remarkable wife, and the unwanted girl had discovered the courage to demand the recognition she deserved. Together, they were about to show their community that true love sees beauty where others see only ordinariness, and that the most extraordinary transformations come from the courage to be authentically ourselves. Their wedding night had revealed Lucy's hidden artistic gifts. Now their love would give her the strength to share those gifts with a world that desperately needed to learn what real beauty looked like.